Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This happened just about a week ago. I just went to a new school since I moved to a different town. I got picked on for being the new kid, but one guy I won't forget is this guy. The entitled kid would steal my lunch, leaving me hungry, forcing me to do his homework, and threatening to hurt me if I don't, and worst of all, he would always make rumors about me that spread around the school. This happened every day, and I started getting tired of this. So my mom decided to buy some Carolina Reaper powder from some store and dump the whole thing into a bag of frozen French fries. She shakes it up and heats it up the next day. Not only that, but she also dipped gummy bears into the container. Since the bully knows I usually go to the library before we have lunch, I decided to do what I usually do. My school usually asks us to take our lunchbox and put it on a desk in a pavilion to avoid kids losing it. But I set up my friend as a spy on a bench as close as he could to the table. We were allowed phones, so he videotaped the whole thing. Unfortunately, he saw the phone and snatched it and threw it on the ground, destroying all the video. Now for the fun bit. I heard a loud scream, so I dashed out to the library, seeing the bully running around with my lunchbox that had half-eaten gummy bears. He falls to the ground and the office calls the ambulance, and they arrive in 10 minutes with a stretcher in hand. They bring him out. The next day I see the bully's parents screaming at the admins in the office. "What the hell do you think you did with my son?" "I'm sorry, but a student told me that he ate someone's lunch." "How could you say that? He will never do that." "I'm sorry to say, but he ate someone's French fries and gummy bears, which gave him an asthma attack." "Why would someone do that to my angel?" "More like a spawn of hell and Satan." "I'm sorry, but your son should be wrong since he ate someone else's lunch." The parent storms out to the office and out of the school. A few weeks later, the entitled parent comes back and punches me in the face, all because the entitled kid stole my lunch. We pressed charges on the entitled parent and her son for theft and assault on minors. My friend went charging her for the phone, but doubled the price of the code because he lost some valuable pictures of his mom before she passed. In the end, she was fined $500 and my friend got $2,000. This takes place a few years after the previous story. By this time, Big Al's business had grown tremendously. He had housing communities going in a 3-state area. He lived in a huge house in a gated community, had a ranch at the base of the mountains, a lake house, and a big condo in Mexico. The company had its own plane and pilot. Big Al was living large. His wife, a former Miss America contestant, didn't make it out of the first round. Was also enjoying the trappings of their success. She is at the high end of high maintenance, and I called her a semi-trophy wife. She is hot, but she's not an airhead. I received a phone call from a longtime friend named Chris. She had been working for Big Al and their marketing department. They were in the process of revamping all of their plans and promotional materials. Their previous guy had convinced Big Al to use some non-standard software for all of their plans. This was starting to create problems in dealing with suppliers and subcontractors as they all wanted drawings in AutoCAD format. The software was totally incompatible. Big Al was gearing up for another expansion, so he wanted everything in AutoCAD 10. Wanted all new landscape promotional renderings. The problem was the lack of a qualified card person. Big Al now had an architect, Tom, but Tom had his hands full cleaning up all the old plans and developing the plans for custom projects. So Big Al had a brilliant idea of calling me to do the work. In all honesty, I could not tell you why he didn't call any of the other 20 people to handle this project when you consider our past. For whatever reason, he wanted me on this project. So I met with Chris and Tom to figure out what we were going to do. I suggested just doing the plans in 2D using standard drawing techniques. We could get the project out the door quite quickly as we'd just be copying existing plans. I even knew of a utility we could use to export the floor plans from the original software and into a format we could use in AutoCAD to create the plans. It would be a huge time saver. Tom, however, wanted to start from scratch and use an amazing tool called Architectural Desktop. It's a version of AutoCAD specifically for building design. I'll spare you the details of exactly how it works, but the biggest item is you can draw in a way that feels like 2D, and it will generate all of your interior and exterior views automatically. It can even break down materials lists, generate sectional details, and on and on and on. All these things we would do by hand can be done automatically. The problem is the learning curve. This isn't something an experienced operator can sit down with and be proficient in a day or two. There is a lot to this program, and Tom had a plan. Tom's plan was to send him and I to school for a week. There were training companies in every major city at the time, so Tom and Chris convinced Big Al to send us to school for a week. The company would cover everything, hotel, food, fees, and everything. I had no out-of-pocket expenses. They weren't going to pay me for my time, but that was fine with me. The cost of school alone was more than my hourly rate would have been. These are skills I can take with me far beyond this project. Like a fool, I again went into this project without a written agreement, not even a handshake, just a verbal agreement to do some work for the company for a per plan rate. Plans will get paid for 1 week after delivery. That's it. AutoCAD at the time worked on a per seat licensing program. The software can be installed on one and only one computer at a time. They had an activation scheme that was pretty much impossible to get around. So part of the agreement with Big Al was that the company would need to provide a piece of software for me to use during this project. No big deal for a company with deep pockets, as they will likely have a need for the seat in the future once I am done with the project. A week before the schooling, I received a big box from the school. In it was the materials for the school, some suggested exercises to practice, and a full version of AutoCAD and Architectural Desktop. Neither have been activated. These were brand new, off-the-shelf, still in shrink-wrap Virgin software. We're talking about at least $5,000 in software here. I figured there must be some mistake that would likely come out in a registration process, so I loaded it on my computer, entered all of my company information, not Big Al's company, and did the online activation. Bang, zoom. It's activated, and it's all mine. I still didn't believe it, so I called the school/company a couple of days later to ask a question. They pulled up my info for verification and said nothing about Big Al's company. As far as they and Autodesk were concerned, I was the owner of this particular license. Yes, it crossed my mind to keep this software, but this was an honest mistake by Big Al's minion, so I will bring up the issue at the end of the project. There were ways to transfer ownership of the registered software. Just some paperwork and a few hoops to jump through. Tom and I headed to school for a week. At the end of the week, we knew our crap. I knew it much better than Tom, but he knew enough to get the job done. We were ready to hit the ground running on Monday. I estimated each plan would take about 3 days, but I was expecting the first 2 to take a week each, as I set up various aspects of the program to work with our needs. I also needed time to get comfortable with the program. For the most part, my estimates were spot on. Tom had no issue with this time frame. Chris wanted it all right now, but understood it was going to take time. Tom's task would be to redline my drawings, make corrections, and work on some custom projects the company had going on. 2.5 weeks later, I had 3 plans done. Tom would mark them up and send revisions back to me. It was usually just little stuff like one would expect from a first draft. Revisions were minimal and usually only took an hour or so. Chris was happy with the results. She had 3 more plans ready for me to convert. I picked them up at the office and started working at the old electronic drawing boards. 10 days later, they were ready to go back and get another set. Side note, When Tom and I were in a big city for a week, we shared the evening meal. We discussed the day's lesson, life outside of work, and so on. The last night we were in town, he said there were some friends of his nearby that would be having dinner with them. That didn't strike me as odd, except that he never said anything about it until the afternoon break. The next morning I asked how it went and he said it was good, but was a bit evasive. I thought maybe my coffee hadn't hit my system yet. Back to the story. When I arrived at the office, I went back to Tom's office to drop the plans. Tom was not there. A new person was sitting at his desk named Amanda. Apparently, Tom's dinner meeting was actually a job interview. He managed to get the job. One reason he pushed for the classes on the new software was related to this new job. He had learned the position was coming open, but the firm wanted someone knowledgeable in AD. So he was able to get his education on a software paid by someone else. I also learned there were some serious office politics going on, with Tom regularly getting shafted by those higher up. Amanda said she was experienced, so I didn't foresee any issues in the transition. Brother, was I wrong? Chris wanted to see me before I left. She told me Amanda did indeed have experience, but it was all in an academic environment. She was fresh out of college. Chris said they would need me to help her along with transitioning into this project. I said they would have to pay me a bit more for that. Chris said she'd talk to Big Al about it. Later that afternoon, Chris called with Big Al's answer. If I wanted to stay involved in this project, then I better help them out. Definitely the wrong thing to say for a couple of reasons. First, I had discovered a serious error in their square footage calculations. All of their plans thus far have been figured about 150 square feet under the actual number. That's a nice little chunk of cash just off of one house. Somewhere between $7,500 to $9,000 at that time. Imagine it over 100 houses. I told the VP in charge of the CAD area, but he was indifferent and told me I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, I've been only calculating square footage for about 15 years. I can see where that might be an argument. As for reason 2, I'm still sore at Big Al for the sins of the past, but I wasn't ready to bounce just yet. I tend to be a good-natured person, and it's really difficult for me to step into ethically questionable areas. I'll need a really firm shove in that direction if I'm going there. And it happened next time I was in the office. Chris told me she needed the next plan as soon as it was done. She would also give me a couple of more plans to save me a trip. So I dropped by, picked up the plans, and went over to Big Al's office. I wanted to talk about this demand for me to help Amanda along without further payment. We had already been through several phone calls of support and a few emails with detailed instructions. It was getting old very quickly, and I also wanted to let him know about the flaw in the square footage calculation I had discovered. Big Al's secretary said he was on the phone but could see me after he was done. Suddenly, we heard Big Al's voice coming booming from his office. Yeah, if you think you have a case against me, then you go ahead and sue. But guess what? I'll bury you in so much legal red tape that you'll run out of money before I do, and you'll never see a dime. So go ahead and sue me. I told the secretary to forget it and don't tell Big Al I was there. She didn't want to talk to him any more than necessary that day, so I am sure she honored my request. At that moment, I knew it was time. Big Al had no problem shafting me over Amanda, and he was shoving other little guys around as well. Everything was in my favor here too. I had no written contract, payments were sent 1 week after delivery. The verbal part of our agreement only stated they would provide me with training and software. One of the witnesses no longer worked at the company. I am fairly certain he'd do whatever it took to screw them too. The verbal part never said anything about completing the project, or that they retained ownership of the software or training. I'll give it back if they screamed loudly about it. I took the next set of plans home and waited 4 days. Big Al had a big expansion going on, complete with grand openings and such. It was all over Chris to get this done. The set of plans she wanted was a flagship of their new huge subdivision. She called and left a message demanding I call her back or bring the completed set of plans as she really needed them. So I packed up the 4 sets of uncompleted plans I had I went to the office. I gave him to Chris, told her it was nothing against her but rather Big Al, and said I was done because of the way I've been treated over the Amanda situation. I also said to tell Big Al not to bother calling me to patch this up or to ever do any work again. I am done with him. Chris was pissed but understood. I waited 2 weeks before breathing easier. If they were going to demand the software back, they would have done it by then. But they didn't. The one person who understood how it worked was Tom, and he was no longer with the company. So I managed to screw Big Al out of about $10,000 worth of software and training. His new subdivision stumbled out of the blocks because Amanda did not get the work done in time. All of his plans had incorrect square footage calculations, causing them to have a reduced level of profit on each plan. Amanda may have caught this, but I seriously doubt it, and I managed to drive a wedge between Big Al and Chris. Chris quit about a year later. She just couldn't take Big Al's ego any longer. Chris and I are still friends. No cliffhanger this time. I do have a story about Big Al taking revenge on a construction crew for using the toilets in newly constructed houses, but the mods had a problem with it and took it down. Still haven't figured out where to post it. I have 3 dogs, Ticky, Scruffy, and Bailey, which my family has rescued from the streets and from uncaring neighbors who couldn't care if the animal died. I also have 2 cats, Halo and Snowflake, both of which I adopted from the SPCA. I have Tourette's, ADD, and OCD, and the tics from my Tourette's made me a prime target for bullying. At that point in my life, I was a shy, weird kid in a class that never spoke. I had no friends, and my companions were the only reason I woke up in the morning. One kid named Andrew, I don't care enough to change his name, loved to feel strong, so he picked on me. He beat me up, made me feel like trash, and sicked other trash human beings on me, one of which I later in my life became friends with. In general, I am really patient and very vengeful. One day, my mom brought one of my dogs, Ticky, to school so we could take her to the vet without driving back home because the closest vet was 50 kilometers away and Ticky needed the heart scan. My mom needed the toilet, so she left Ticky with me. Straight after she left, Andrew and 2 of his goons showed up. "What's this, Paz? Got a new toy for us to play with?" "Andrew, please, she's very sick. I am begging you, please leave her alone." "Oh, but where's the fun in that?" Andrew proceeds to then pick Ticky up and toss her to his friends. Ticky had surgery and steel bars placed on a few of her bones, so it hurts her a lot if you don't pick her up properly. Because of the pain she's in, she snaps at Andrew and bites his hand. "Little witch, learn respect." Andrew then proceeds to chuck Ticky a solid 5 meters where she hits the ground on her side. I begin to scream and my mom starts to run from the bathroom after hearing my scream. Andrew and his gang then run, laughing. My mom and I scoop Ticky up, who's wheezing and bleeding from her mouth, and take her to the vet while I tell my mom what happened on the way there. Ticky ended up passing away because of brain hemorrhaging from the blunt trauma. Scruffy waited at the front door of my house for 2 days waiting for Ticky to come home. Waiting. I tried to tell the staff what happened, but Andrew was a popular kid and his parents were very close friends with the principal, so nothing was done to get justice. This whole ordeal caused me to become immensely depressed, but in the end I was left a festering vessel of rage. No more quiet shy kid, no more little weak boy, no more. I devised a plan. I went to the gym every morning at 4:30 until 5:30, then I would get dressed and go to school. This boosted my self-confidence and I soon gained a few friends who are still my friends to this day. I became a teacher's pet. I made the whole school think I was a loyal goody two-shoes teacher's pet, all according to plan. After 3 years, I was seen by the staff as the epitome of a good and innocent student. No one would suspect me to harm anyone else. Andrew had a scholarship to my school for playing sports and it was his passion in life. It would be a shame if someone were to end that. I told some people who I knew would take action what he did to my dog and how I knew some people that would pay generously for the service. Next week, everyone is chatting in class. You hear what happened to Andrew? Yeah, I heard someone mugged him and bust up his leg. A comminuted leg bone was what was left. The assailant smashed Andrew's leg with a hammer so many times that the bone broke into more than 5 pieces. The leg was unsalvageable. Bye bye scholarship and all his favorite things to do in life. No one suspected me. The outgoing, kind teacher's pet who never held grudges. Yes, definitely not me. Andrew, if you're reading this, I have just one thing to say. See you in hell. This happened a few years back. Our HOA has always been known to be sneaky and to flat out give false accusations on homeowners, especially on this day with security cameras, and we can pretty easily spot out who the investigators are. Most recently, a homeowner was told she was supposed to get approval before she started re-shingling her roof. The thing is, her roof hasn't been re-shingled in 10 years, and she had no plans to do it. Things like that. Call it just a mistake, call it malicious. Well, a few years ago, we had our time to shine. It was a simple morning. I was still temporarily living with my father at the time. Well, one morning we decided to go out to get groceries when we found that his pickup truck had been smashed into. Nothing was taken, it was just smashed into. In fact, I still have pictures from that day, just before the cops arrived. Cops arrive, they do some investigating and find that a rock inside the truck was from a house down the street. Unfortunately, they couldn't get them to admit to the crime, nor could they prove it was even them. Understandable, criminals will grab things that they find, but it was suspicious. The rock, I should say, was a special kind of rock that no one else in the neighborhood had. Some round, polished type, very unique. After this incident, I installed a security camera on this house. Well, not 2 days later, we got an HOA violation for a vehicle eyesore that needs to be removed. Just 2 days later, I am confused how such a letter could have been written up so fast, but I started to suspect foul play. One day, we were home and had a knock at the door. The HOA actually called a code inspection officer, and the week hadn't even been over yet, so the parts to fix the truck weren't delivered yet. We weren't paying expedited shipping for damages we didn't cause, and the truck was so old insurance will probably just total it. The truck is sentimental to him, so he wasn't going to get rid of it. It still ran great. Code inspection tells my father that vehicles which do not run need to be removed. They both stop talking and take a second, and both almost say at the same time, "Don't I know you?" Turns out the code inspection officer went to the same church as my father, and they knew each other. This isn't malicious compliance yet. We are only just beginning. The officer tells my father if he can show the truck starts, he's going to write it up as being in code. My father starts the truck just fine, as the engine isn't damaged. He tells him to go on with his day and to have a good one. At this point, we are furious because we are starting to suspect the HOA may have done this, as there is no way they could have possibly known so fast. Unfortunately, our turn of the street had no neighbors with security cameras until I installed one on our house, so it got nothing specific to our incident. Down the street, these people supposedly broke into a car as well, but the camera on their house was unable to see anything. Here's where the fun begins. Fast forward a couple months after nothing happened, I decided to install a new dash cam in my car. I found a good one that uses very little power out of the battery and can activate if there is any bumps to the car, even if the car is off. It just needs to be wired straight to the battery for this. It's a thinkware. A few days later, we got a violation notice for our mailbox being crooked. It wasn't crooked much, but I do remember it recently having an angle. Odd, I could just fix it, but my car was aiming straight at the mailbox. I'm thinking, no, this couldn't be possible. It only records if there is a bump. I took out the memory card and apparently I either didn't configure it correctly, but it was recording the whole time. It never went into sleep mode. I watched as the investigator walked up to the mailbox and pushed it crooked, then wrote down on his tablet his findings and took a picture for records. I'm appalled at what I see. I have the proof I needed. Now for the malicious compliance part. They wanted us to come to the board meeting and present what is going on at our address. We haven't told him yet that we had the pictures, but to summarize real fast how our HOA works, the board hires an outside company to do the grunt work. Let's call it Pintry Management. We go to the meeting and sit down. Pintry Management has a one in control of our account. And I swear to you, she looked like a Karen. So the name really fits for her. As time goes by in the meeting, we get to discuss what is happening at our house. We present the timelines and tell them about the truck being smashed. And just 2 days later, we get a letter. We ask what dates the investigator was out for that time. Karen refuses to answer it. She argues ignorantly that we should keep better care of our stuff, as if it was our fault. Then comes the mailbox incident. We tell her that we have reasons to believe that the investigator is the one that is causing damages to our property and is harassing us. Karen denies this and says that is impossible, and that she knows him personally. Oh, is that so? I ask, and she says, yes, why? I then pull out my laptop out of my book bag that I have been hiding, open it up to the video file already loaded, and show it to the entire board. Enter Exhibit A. I said out loud and played the video. Karen's face is bright red. She says that is not her investigator. I then also pulled out the letter about the mailbox, which was complete with a date. It matches a cooked on timestamp on a video. She still tries to claim it's not them. No, it's a coincidence. I'm sorry, but you have a vandal and it's not us. Oh, it's not? I let the video play, knowing she's falling into a bit hard right now. As a man walks towards my car, you can plain as day see Pintry Management on his shirt. She's no longer red now, she's white as a ghost. The board looks over at her and asks her what she has to say about this. Karen is silent and has nothing except a few noises, which I assume was her brain trying to comprehend what just happened. I then proceeded to bring up a previous case, which I happened to remember before we left for the meeting, where we had a grass violation beside our house. Now this area they were claiming was actually not visible from the sidewalk due to the house shape. I asked point blank, has at any time your investigators walked on our property, illegally trespassing, knowing as per their rules, they aren't allowed to do that. Karen is visibly shaken now and mutters out, no, of course not, with her head down, unable to maintain eye contact with me. She probably feels that I have more evidence, but unfortunately I did not. So I ask again, and she asks, why? Our neighbors who are lawyers literally next door to us where the side of this wall was, stands up and says, actually that's not true. I have witnessed one of your investigators go between our houses and poke around the trash bins. Bingo. I didn't even realize she had this information. I couldn't have asked for better timing. Karen at this point just starts arguing with our neighbors about no proof. The board proceeded to apologize for the incident, and they were going to discuss what is going to happen in the future about this. At that point, the meeting is over. A month passes and we get a letter that a new person will be in charge of Pintry Management, and new investigators too. She was fired that night. Since she was fired, my father tells me we only get the occasional blip of errors, but they correct it immediately, and don't bother us really anymore. Context. I, Chinese, was 8 years old when my family decided to move to Canada. Chinese education systems are 10 times harder than Canadian education systems. After having me try grade 3 in Canada, it was ridiculously easy as mental math was my strong suit and other kids were not really capable of doing mental math. I ended up spending most of my day daydreaming doing nothing. My dad believed that it would be better for me to return to China to continue my education until I finish elementary. Being able to emigrate to Canada in 2007 was a really costly endeavor. My dad was pretty rich. Chinese teachers usually eye the students and determine which students to suck up to, so the parents would want to invest in a school. Basically, differential treatments. However, my mom and dad made sure that I did not stand out from the crowd. So no one knows of my family other than the principal of the school. I returned back to China to resume studies. and my homeroom teacher decided she hated me for some reason. Maybe because my English teacher was very fond of me and usually just let me do whatever I want. Apart from kicking me with her high heels in front of a class of 50 kids and telling me not to tell anyone, she gave me a super hard assignment for me to do and told me to not come back to the class the next day unless I completed the entire assignment. I really want to go to school, so I was trying super hard. It's normal for elementary students in China to stay up till like 10 or even 12 to work on their homework. The assignment was super easy until the last question, which was, list 100 places in Xinjiang that raise a Chinese flag. Xinjiang is my hometown. My dad usually expects me to finish all the assignments by 10 so we can watch TV together. My dad usually expects me to finish all the assignments by 10 so we can watch TV together. When he came into my room to check on me, he saw the question and I was sure he was holding in his anger. He told me to go to sleep and that I should just go back to school tomorrow without my homework and just tell the homeroom teacher that I did not do my homework. The next day, the homeroom teacher was not happy about me not bringing in the assignment and brought me to the principal. Lo and behold, my dad was sitting there with the principal drinking tea. The principal introduced my dad to the homeroom teacher and she arrogantly said, "Your son did not do the homework he was assigned and threw it away. How dare he?" The principal just sat there looking embarrassingly at her. Turns out my dad was one of the top investors of the school, and during the time of this incident, the principal was trying to get on my dad's good side so my dad could invest more into the school. My dad slapped down the assignment that I was supposed to hand in and asked the principal if he could complete the entire assignment in one night. What the heck is this? 100 places in Xinjiang? 100 places in Xinjiang that praise a Chinese flag? The principal asked the teacher. I can explain. This question is not that hard. The student just has to look for it. Mind you, there were no Google Maps or Google Earth at the time. Look for it? Is this homework for the students or is this homework for the parents? The principal yelled at her. He then turned to my dad. I am so sorry about this. This is outrageous. What do you want me to do with the situation? I am not being unreasonable, so I would like to give the teacher a chance. Have her complete this assignment by tomorrow or you fire her. That is very unreasonable. I can't do this. Your child was misbehaving, so I'm teaching him a lesson. My dad calmly asked, does kicking my child with high heels count as teaching him a lesson as well? You can't make accusations like that. That's defamation. The principal knows that my mom is still in Canada with my sister, and it was just my dad and I that were living in China at the time. So you're saying either his mom flew back from Canada just to kick him with high heels or his dad put on high heels and kicked his own son. Enough is enough. You can leave now. Complete this assignment by tomorrow morning or come anyways to pack your belongings. A student's dad can't fire me, but I can. Go back to teaching your class. I was sent home early with my dad and I never saw that teacher again. She was replaced by my English teacher and life was good afterwards. This is a story of how my mom destroyed 2 teachers for messing with me and my older brother. I apologize for all spelling and grammar mistakes. English is my second language. Some background. We all were born and live in Poland, so some things work here differently than in other countries. Me and my brother both suffer from glaucoma. He's currently blind, but he had better eyesight than me when we were kids. Our mom is not perfect. She is in fact very imperfect. She can be selfish, petty, egoistic, annoying, and she tends to forget everything wrong she did. But she will remember even the smallest slight against her. True or not, I will not forgive it. She has some characteristics of a classic sociopath. But if anyone just touched her children, they would invite their own doom. Hell has no fury like my mother pissed off. When it comes to her ass, Khan was a puppy when compared to our mother. Her story happened when I was in 4th grade. At the end of May 1996, I went to a school for blind and visually impaired as my left eye is broken. That year we had a new class and a new teacher, let's call him Mr. Jerk. The class was a combination of how it works, home improvement, and shop class. It was in 1996. Back then, it was okay for 10 to 11-year-old kids to use hand tools. Our teacher was young, and in order to be more hip, or whatever you call that, was us, he threw at us one-liners from 101 funny one-liners and insults booklets. By this, he gave us permission to retaliate the same way. We did, but because we were kids then, not only were we better at this, but also knew more biting responses. Because of the state of my sight, it's very hard for me to recognize faces, and almost impossible to see if someone is happy, sad, or pissed off at me. So one day I crossed the line and pissed off the teacher so much, he actually smacked me in the head. Hard. Side note, glaucoma increases dramatically the risk of retinal detachment, which can lead to blindness, and I already had one eye that didn't work. So I told it to my mom. When she came to pick me up, my mom just straightened up, asked who witnessed it, the entire class of 9 students. She grabbed one of my classmates. He went pale when she did, and dragged us both to the principal's office. She barged in like Spanish Inquisition and asked our principal if he knew what happened in his school and if he liked to have a visit from some journalists from the local radio station. The principal asked what it was about, and then she told me to tell the story, which I did promptly. Then she asked my friend, "Is it true, Kay? Is it?" "Yes, ma'am," he mumbled, barely standing straight as he was shaken by my mom and the situation. We were told to leave. I'm sure Kay felt like a death row inmate getting amnesty just minutes from scheduled execution. Mr. Jerk was asked to come in, and after a few minutes of yelling, my mother suggested that she would smack his head a few times. Pleading, principal didn't want the media to be involved, and suggestions that the Board of Education for the province will be informed. The teacher left, defeated and broken, and he never returned. Second story happened earlier in November or December. My brother went to normal public school. He was in 8th grade. His English teacher, or our second language, didn't like him. His classmates didn't either. One day my brother couldn't answer a grammar question. The teacher, let's call her Miss Dummy, told his classmates that he needs a beating. Well, they assumed it was their homework, so as soon as classes ended, my brother was surrounded and beaten up by 6 or 7 of them, while the rest of the class watched. I remember when he returned home that day all bloody and bruised, and my mom asked him what's happened, and when he told her, she ordered me to get dressed, and she took care of my brother's injuries. And we went back to his school 20 minutes later. My mother was invited to the principal's office, both Miss Dummy, class teacher, Miss Incompetence, and school counselor. This time, I stayed outside the office, but despite the soundproof doors, I heard our mom yelling. The counselor was beaten with decibels for not doing his job. That is, dealing with classmates not liking my brother for being visually impaired. The class teacher was declared an incompetent idiot for not seeing signs, but the classmates wanted to beat my brother, but only needed a reason to do it. Miss Dummy was informed that after her 15 years of experience, she's still a screw-up and won't teach anyone anywhere. The Board of Education will be informed. The end result was that Miss Dummy was dismissed disciplinarily and lost her right to teach. Miss Incompetence had a permanent negative mark in her record. The Board of Education was informed, and my brother was moved to my school. The principal was happy that she would never again have to face my mom.